Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I bought 6 acres of quiet Colorado land, I thought I'd left chaos behind. No neighbors, no noise, just peace. Then the HOA came. Bulldozers, forged maps, and a plan to steal my driveway. They didn't know who they were messing with. I'm a surveyor, and I came prepared for war. I've always believed in minding my own business, and in return, I expect the world to do the same. That's why I bought 6 acres of peace and silence just outside Ridge County, Colorado. No nosy neighbors, no passing traffic, just me, the foothills, and the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones. The property came with a rough gravel driveway that curved over an old steel culvert and connected to the state highway through a narrow gulch. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Cleared, surveyed, and recorded down to the inch. I wasn't part of any HOA. That was part of the appeal. I'd been a geodetic surveyor for 16 years before shifting into infrastructure consulting. So when I say I know my property lines, I mean it literally. I drew them. I filed the documentation myself when I bought the parcel off an old cattle trust and finalized a minor re-subdivision. Nobody could touch it, at least that's what I thought. Then came the traffic. Not much at first. A few SUVs here and there using my road like it was a shortcut to the trailhead on the other side of the ridge. I figured it was just locals too lazy to drive the long way around. But when I caught a pickup full of kayaks barreling past my front porch and throwing up dust like they were in the Baja 1000, I knew something had to change. So I built a gate, not a rickety chain link eyesore either. I'm talking galvanized steel posts, welded frame, solar-powered opener with keypad access, the whole 9 yards. I even added a sign, private property, no access. Trespassers will be prosecuted. It was less of a warning and more of a polite scream. I had it installed on a Tuesday. By Thursday afternoon, the entire thing was gone. I came back from town with a sack of feed and a new blade for my chainsaw and found the posts bent in half like pretzels. The gate itself was twisted into the ditch like a child had stomped a toy. Tire tracks, deep ones, led right up to the wreckage. Fresh hydraulic oil stained the gravel. For a moment, I stood there just blinking at it. Then I saw the orange spray paint still fresh on the ground. 3 letters in bold uppercase, HOA. That was the first time I realized the people from across the gulch, the ones with cookie-cutter houses and wine-tasting flags in their yards, had a name. Silver Trail Meadows Homeowners Association, and apparently they had bulldozers. Before I could even process it, a man in a reflective vest drove up in a white flatbed truck with a little logo on the door that read Silver Trail Property Maintenance. He hopped out like nothing was wrong. "You Lawson?" he asked, chewing a toothpick. "It's Lawson, and yeah, you with the people who flattened my gate?" HOA ordered removal, he said like it was just another Tuesday. Said the structure was obstructing community access. Said it was illegal. Illegal? I almost laughed. This is private land. I've got the deed and the surveys. He shrugged. Not my call. I'm just the guy with the backhoe. I told him if he didn't want to be the guy with a lawsuit, he should disappear fast. He didn't argue. I called the sheriff. Figured it would be an open and shut case. Vandalism, destruction of private property. Instead, 2 deputies showed up, took a look at the mess, and immediately started asking me questions. "Where's the permit for this gate?" one of them asked. "It's on my property." "I don't need a permit," I replied. "That's what you say," he muttered. They pulled out a copy of a faxed map, grainy and unlabeled, and said HOA claimed my driveway crossed a community easement that had existed since the 80s. Total nonsense. That easement had been dissolved before I even bought the land. But when I tried to explain that, they just gave me that look, like I was some angry loner causing problems for the neighborhood. To top it off, they handed me a citation for unpermitted obstruction of shared access and told me that if I rebuild the gate, I could be charged with interfering in public right-of-way. I nearly choked. I stood there, holding a piece of mangled steel, while a couple of smug HOA patrol volunteers took selfies across the road like they'd just liberated Normandy. They even had the audacity to leave behind a laminated note zip-tied to the fence post. Silver Trail maintains access to shared routes. Future obstructions will be removed without warning. I didn't know whether to laugh or start swinging. Instead, I walked into my shop, pulled out the original surveys, my deed, the topographic overlays, and started scanning. I knew exactly what this was now. It wasn't about traffic. It wasn't about gates. It was a land grab disguised as community interest, and I'd just declared war. I didn't sleep much that night. Between the adrenaline spike and the sheer absurdity of what had just happened, my brain was too wired to shut off. I spent hours at my kitchen table surrounded by plats, legal descriptions, and topographic maps. Everything from the original USDA overlays to the county land registry database. If you wanted to go to war with a geodetic engineer, you better bring more than an HOA map that looked like it was printed on a toaster. Around 7 a.m., I was sipping coffee on the porch, going over old email chains with the county recorder, when I saw her, Karen Westmore. Even before she crossed the gulch, I knew it was her. Tall, surgically frozen face, sharp sunglasses, and that HOA gait, the kind of walk that said she thought the sun itself needed her permission to rise. She had two guys with her, both dressed like they got lost on their way to a tactical boot camp. One of them carried a clipboard. The other looked like a brick wall in Under Armour. They walked right up to my new temporary cattle gate, which I'd slapped up with barbed wire and a padlock the night before, and Karen didn't even knock. She didn't ask. She just pointed at the lock and said, "You'll need to remove this." Now. I stood up, letting the screen door clap shut behind me. "I'm going to stop you right there," I said calmly. "You're trespassing. You're standing on private property, and you've got about 10 seconds before I call the sheriff." Karen didn't flinch. "We're not trespassing. This land is under jurisdiction of Silver Trail Meadows. Our community maps clearly show this road as a shared access route." I walked down the path slowly, stopping at the gate. "Show me." She handed me a folder like it was the final proof of her divine authority. I opened it and tried not to snort. It was a photocopy of a hand-drawn map from what looked like the late 80s, with a red line scrawled across the middle. No parcel numbers, no coordinates, no official stamps. A joke. "This is trash," I said flatly. "The easement was nullified in 2004. I have the official recording from the county." Karen took a deep breath, like she was pretending to be patient. "We've already filed a petition with the county commission to reclassify this section of road as a community asset. You'll be receiving notice soon. In the meantime, your gate violates our emergency access protocols." I blinked. "Emergency access protocols?" "Fire trucks," she said. "Public safety. You're blocking a potential fire corridor." I looked around at the dried brush and empty hillside. "This is a 6-acre private drive. The only fire this road's seen in 20 years was a barbecue accident." She ignored me. "You're on the wrong side of this, Mr. Lawson. We're trying to be civil, but if you insist on hostility, we'll proceed accordingly." "Hostility?" I stepped forward. "You bulldozed my gate. You forged a map. You brought hired muscle to my land. And now you're threatening to take my property?" Karen gave me that cold, rehearsed smile, the kind you see on real estate flyers and crime documentaries. "You want war," she said, voice low and sharp. "You've got it. The board already voted. We're annexing the corridor, whether you like it or not." I didn't answer. I just stared until she turned, signaled her dogs of war, and walked back across the gulch like she'd just won something. The next day, I got the notice. Certified mail, heavy envelope, official seal from the Ridge County Zoning and Easement Commission. According to the document, the Silver Trail Meadows HOA had submitted a petition to integrate Lawson Access Corridor into a collective-use community roadway system for the benefit of the adjacent residential subdivision. They claimed historic use, connective necessity, and most laughably, infrastructure neglect on behalf of the current owner. They attached that same fake map as historical proof. It looked clean, official, until you started digging. I scanned the file and ran the plat number. It didn't match any recorded survey on file. The lot lines were skewed, and the red line indicating the road cut directly across a section that, according to my deed, was surveyed and fenced decades before Silver Trail even existed. They were building their case on paper that didn't exist in the real world. But I knew how this game worked. Bureaucratic pressure and manufactured doubt. The county commission wasn't going to investigate every line and overlay unless I forced them to. I pulled out my field bag, checked my drone battery, and got to work. If they wanted a fight on paper, they were about to get one, layered, geo-referenced, and notarized in triplicate. They didn't waste any time. By the following Monday, there was a shiny new gate standing at the far end of my access road, just where my gravel touched the edge of the Silver Trail Meadows development. It wasn't just a gate, it was a message. bright aluminum frame, keypad access, and a sign bolted to the front that read, Temporary Access Control, Authorized Vehicles Only, HOA Enforcement Division. What the hell was an enforcement division? I drove up to it mid-morning just to confirm what I already knew. It was locked. I punched the call button and got nothing but static. The gate wasn't wired to anything local. It was remote controlled, probably via HOA's clubhouse, which sat about 100 yards inside their side of the gulch. I backed up, grabbed my phone, and called the non-emergency sheriff's line. I'd already filed a report about the destruction of my gate, and I figured this new installation counted as escalation. To their credit, a deputy showed up within the hour. To their discredit, it was the same guy who had handed me the citation for the unpermitted obstruction the week before. Mr. Lawson, he said, stepping out of the cruiser, hands on his belt like he was on a recruiting poster. You called in about a locked gate again. Not my gate this time, I replied, pointing. That's their gate. It's on the property line, and it's blocking my only vehicular access to the highway. He looked it over with a casual glance, then turned back to me. Far as I can tell, it's on the easement. Still a disputed zone, right? It's not disputed. I've got county-verified documentation and an active deed. I sent the records to your office last week. Sure, but HOA claims they filed for reclassification, so until the zoning board makes a ruling, it's a gray area. I narrowed my eyes. So I'm being cut off from my own home because someone claimed my road on a Xeroxed map from 1989. He gave me a half-hearted shrug. You can still get through if you contact the HOA and get the code. And what happens if they refuse? Well, he said, already walking back to his cruiser, maybe y'all can work it out like neighbors. That was the last time I called the sheriff's department for anything short of an armed standoff. That night, I hiked up the ridgeline behind my house with a thermal scope and watched. Sure enough, two men in reflective vests took turns standing near the gate like they were guarding a military outpost. One of them even had a collapsible baton clipped to his hip. Rent-a-cops. HOA had stationed security to control a road they didn't own. I wasn't stupid. I didn't try to force my way through. Not yet. Instead, I rerouted my truck down an old logging path that curved around the east side of my lot. It was steep, rocky, and absolutely not intended for daily use, but it got me access to a utility lane that connected to the state road. The HOA probably thought they'd boxed me in. They had no idea I used to design infrastructure workarounds for mountain towns cut off by avalanches. I figured I had a few days before their next move. I was wrong. The following morning, I was working in my shop when I heard a soft buzzing. At first, I thought it was a wasp nest. Then I looked out the window and saw the drone. It was hovering just over the tree line, about 20 feet above my backyard, sweeping slowly left to right. I stepped outside and stared at it. The thing had a stabilized gimbal camera, high-end rotors, and the same company logo I'd seen on the side of the contractor truck that tore my gate down. Stratus Developments. I grabbed my phone and snapped 3 pictures. Then I reached down and picked up my 12-gauge, just to make a point. The drone zipped back over the gulch like it was late for dinner. That afternoon, I dug into public records and land use filings. Sure enough, I found a permit request from Stratus Developments submitted 3 months ago, a proposal for a new residential subphase called Silver Trail Vista. The planned roads ran directly through the hillside where my driveway currently sat. And that wasn't even the best part. The accompanying documents listed my parcel as an undeveloped residential lot, a bureaucratic euphemism they'd likely slipped into the planning paperwork by claiming my house was abandoned or uninhabited. I'd seen the trick before. It was textbook HOA land grab playbook, redefine, rezone, and absorb. They were planning to pave over my road, to fold my driveway into their subdivision, and if they couldn't buy me out, they'd try to squeeze me until I had no options left. I wasn't just dealing with HOA politics. This was a coordinated, premeditated attempt to annex private land by force and fraud. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and started making calls. If they wanted to fight on paper, fine. But I wasn't bringing paper anymore. I was bringing data. I didn't waste a second. That same night, I drove down to Denver with a flash drive full of documents and a contact list that hadn't seen daylight in years. Back when I worked as an infrastructure consultant, I'd built some solid connections in the state land use department and among a few independent engineering firms. I didn't like calling in favors, but this wasn't a favor. This was a forensic investigation waiting to happen. By 8 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting across from Mason Hanley, a former colleague of mine and now lead technician at a high-resolution leader mapping firm. I handed him the flash drive and a layout of my property's boundaries, overlays, and a recent scan I'd done with my DJI drone. "I need this modeled in full 3D, I said. "Every inch, every rise, depression, and right-of-way line. I want it certified and admissible in court." Mason grinned. "You're bringing the hammer, huh?" "I'm past the hammer," I replied. "This is carpet bombing." By the end of the day, I had a full-color LiDAR terrain map accurate to within 2 centimeters, showing my access road entirely within the limits of my parcel. No overlap, no servitude, no community claim, just rock-solid proof that the HOA was lying. But I wasn't done yet. I dug into the Ridge County Records Archive and unearthed the original subdivision plat for Silver Trail Meadows. And there it was. Their eastern boundary line stopped short of the gulch. My access road wasn't even visible. It was drawn as private, pre-existing farm access, unconnected to their grid. Then I stumbled onto something even more interesting. In a folder marked Public Hearing Notes, 2016, I found a complaint filed by a man named Leonard Glass, now deceased. He had lived near the same gulch. According to the record, he'd accused Silver Trail HOA of forging utility expansion documents to force him into selling his driveway access for under market value. The county had declined to investigate, citing lack of corroborating evidence. I scanned the complaint and cross-referenced the contractor listed in the paperwork. Stratus Developments, same company, same scheme. Only this time, I wasn't dying quietly in my rocking chair. I was setting up crossfire. By the end of the week, I had 3 reports: my LiDAR model and official survey from Mason, historical parcel data from the County Land Commission, the archived HOA harassment complaint from 2016. I submitted them in a formal letter to Ridge County Zoning and Easement Commission with a notarized affidavit and demand for immediate termination of the HOA's annexation petition. I CC'd the county attorney, my own lawyer, and one particular name on the engineering review board, Joan Reyes, whom I'd mentored back in the day. 2 days later, I got a phone call. "Mr. Lawson," said the voice on the line. "Yes. This is Joan Reyes with the Ridge County Engineering Panel. I've reviewed your documents. I'd like to schedule a formal review of the HOA's filings, preferably with their representatives present." "Happy to oblige." "And Mr. Lawson, thank you for bringing this forward. It's not the first time we've seen something shady come out of Silver Trail, but this is the first time someone brought receipts. That was the turning point, but things didn't quiet down. If anything, they got louder. The day after I filed my complaint, 2 white trucks rolled onto my property. No markings, just plain white pickups with yellow strobes. They parked by the ravine and started surveying with tripods and high-vis vests. I walked up and asked for credentials. One of them told me to call Silver Trail Operations for verification. I didn't even bother yelling. I just snapped photos, filmed them with a timestamp, and reported them for trespassing. The same afternoon, I received an anonymous email. No body text, just an attachment, a scan of a proposed rezoning plan dated next month, showing my land as undeveloped Zone C. Their construction hadn't started. They were already planning to draw me out of the map entirely. They weren't just bluffing anymore. They were playing long ball. That night, I uploaded everything, every photo, every drone video, every map and affidavit to a secure drive and copied it twice. One for my attorney, one for the local newspaper. They'd picked the wrong engineer to fence in. The day of the hearing was overcast, like the weather itself had read the case file and was bracing for impact. I arrived at the Ridge County Municipal Building in a pressed shirt, jeans, and steel-capped boots, respectably blue collar. My lawyer, Denise Wakefield, met me at the entrance with a stack of neatly tabbed folders and a subtle smirk that told me we were loaded for bear. Karen showed up 20 minutes late, flanked by 2 HOA board members, her real estate attorney, who looked like he still used fax machines, and a man I recognized instantly. The regional project manager from Stratus Developments, the one I'd seen photographed standing by my wrecked gate. So much for community interest. The county engineering board convened in conference room B. a gray-walled space with fold-out chairs and coffee that tasted like cardboard. Reyes sat at the head of the panel, flanked by a zoning specialist and a land use compliance officer. The moment Karen took her seat, she launched into her performance. With all due respect, she began, pressing her pearls like a car salesman clutching a Bible. This is not a hostile action. Silver Trail Meadows merely seeks to restore functional access to a road long used by our residents, one that Mr. Lawson has recently and unreasonably obstructed. She gestured toward her folder of maps, ones I already knew were fake. Our HOA documents, dating back to 1990, show this corridor as a de facto community route. We believe it falls under implied dedication and are requesting its formal annexation under emergency access protocols. Joan Reyes leaned forward, steepling her fingers. Ms. Westmore, do you have any legally recorded documents, surveys, plats, or parcel overlays that show this road as part of Silver Trail jurisdiction? Karen paused. Our documentation is historical in nature. Historical is not synonymous with legal, Reyes said, her voice hardening. Denise stood and placed a full-color map on the table. This is Mr. Lawson's LiDAR-based parcel model, created less than 7 days ago, showing accurate GPS alignment of all registered borders and rights-of-way. I've included the county-verified deed, the 1997 easement dissolution, and satellite overlays confirming that no HOA infrastructure crosses or adjoins his property. I followed up. The HOA is attempting to claim ownership through fraudulent zoning language and a fabricated use pattern. Their only goal is to reroute my private drive into a commercial access point for a new development, one that isn't even approved yet. Karen scoffed. That's speculation. Denise pulled out the next sheet. Here's their zoning proposal, filed last quarter. It lists Mr. Lawson's land as Zone C and refers to it as currently unutilized. We have confirmation from the County Records Department that this designation was added without any input from Mr. Lawson. Karen flushed. Her lawyer tried to intervene with some jargon about communal benefit infrastructure, but it didn't land. Reyes was already making notes. Then Denise slid the final nail across the table. A screenshot from a drone video, one of HOA's own, showing security guards blocking Mr. Lawson's driveway while a second man unloaded surveying equipment. Your client claimed emergency access, Denise said coolly, and yet they used it to stage unauthorized work crews on land they don't own. That's trespassing, obstruction of private access, and construction without permit. The room fell silent. Karen sat frozen, her face stiff, like someone poured plaster into her bloodstream. Reyes looked at the zoning officer. Is there any legal basis under county code that allows for retroactive annexation of private roads without owner consent? The zoning officer shook his head. Only under public utility exemptions or emergency domain acquisition. This situation qualifies as neither. Reyes turned to Karen. You will withdraw this petition immediately. Failure to comply will result in formal referral to the district attorney's office for land use fraud and document tampering. Denise leaned over and whispered, they didn't just lose. They lit themselves on fire. Karen stood, shaking, and whispered something to her lawyer before storming out of the room, heels stabbing the floor like she was trying to kill it. We stayed behind and finalized a formal injunction. The HOA was ordered to dismantle their temporary gate within 72 hours and submit a public retraction acknowledging they had no jurisdiction over my property. Stratus Developments was referred to the State Licensing Board for investigation of improper filings. Outside the building, a local reporter was waiting. I didn't say much, just enough for the record, but the next morning the headline said it all. Engineer exposes HOA land grab, county slams fraudulent takeover attempt. I thought that would be the end of it. Silly me. 2 days after the injunction, I came home from a supply run and found the eastern edge of my property crawling with activity. Not official crews, not utility trucks. No, these were contractor types, wearing blank vests and no ID badges, stringing temporary orange fencing along the gulch like they were cordoning off a crime scene. One of them was spray painting marks on the gravel where my driveway curved downhill, and another had already started unloading prefab concrete blocks from a flatbed. I parked, stepped out slowly, and asked the first guy I saw who they were working for. He barely looked up. Silver Trail, road regrade project. I called Denise. She was livid. The injunction had been filed and signed. Karen had no legal leg left to stand on. This wasn't just contempt of court. It was open defiance. We called the sheriff again. This time, they actually responded. 2 patrol cars pulled up and told the workers to cease operations immediately. They complied, but not before I overheard one of them mutter, "She said it was already approved." She, of course, meant Karen. Later that evening, while reviewing the footage from my motion cams, I saw 2 of those same guys come back after dark. They stood by the gate foundation, shined lights at my cameras, and one of them threw a rock at the sensor post before running off. Denise filed a formal contempt motion the next morning, and just to twist the knife, I included a thumb drive with the night footage and a drone shot from earlier that week, showing their equipment stashed behind the HOA clubhouse, clearly prepared for unauthorized use. But that wasn't the real hammer. The real hammer came from the inside. An email landed in my inbox late at night. Subject line: "I need to talk. I have information." No name, just a Proton mail address and a promise to meet in person. Normally, I'd have ignored something that vague, but the message contained 3 scanned documents, internal HOA emails, showing Karen had bypassed a board vote to continue road enforcement under the assumption that Lawson won't have the funds to litigate more than once. She was betting I'd fold. The next day, I met the sender at a diner just outside town. Her name was Rachel Lim, former treasurer of the HOA. She'd resigned a month ago and decided she'd seen enough. She brought more than just emails. She had financial statements, payments made to Stratus Developments labeled Community Infrastructure Research, totaling over $20,000, authorized by Karen without board consensus. She also had meeting minutes, doctored ones. Originals were saved on her own device, and they told a different story than the official versions Karen had presented to the county. In short, fraud, misrepresentation, and unauthorized spending. Rachel agreed to sign an affidavit and hand over the files to the district attorney's office. Denise sent the entire package over that afternoon. 2 hours later, we received confirmation. The DA was opening a criminal investigation into fraudulent financial activity and falsification of legal records by a homeowners association president. That same evening, the HOA community forum online went nuclear. Screenshots of Karen's actions leaked. Rachel had sent them to a few of the quieter board members, who in turn leaked them to residents. Comments started pouring in, accusations, demands, threats of a vote to remove the entire board. Karen didn't respond, but someone else did. A man named Joseph Earl, listed as HOA vice president, posted an official statement. Effective immediately, Karen Westmore has been suspended from all HOA duties pending legal review. A special emergency meeting will be held to determine next steps. We apologize to Mr. Lawson and the community for any overreach that may have occurred. They still called it overreach, like they accidentally tripped into fraud and tried to annex 6 acres of private land as a community service. But I didn't care what they called it. The collapse had started. By the time the special HOA meeting was scheduled, it was already too late for damage control. I watched the live stream, if you can believe it. HOA transparency at its finest, complete with a shaky Facebook feed and a moderator who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Karen didn't appear, of course. She was under review, which apparently meant hiding behind whatever lawyer hadn't abandoned her yet. But the rest of the board sat in a community hall full of folding chairs and folding tempers. The residents weren't just angry, they were furious. Turns out, most of them hadn't even known about the road annexation attempt. They were told it was a landscape enhancement project. Others had noticed the money bleeding from HOA reserves but had been brushed off or gaslit by Karen's inner circle. Now they had proof. Rachel's documents, leaked correspondence, and the DA's preliminary inquiry, all out in the open. A motion was made. A vote was held. Unanimous. Karen Westmore, removed as HOA president, stripped of all administrative access, and formally disavowed by the board. It would have been a beautiful moment, if not for the fact that I knew what was coming next. Because the very next morning, I got a phone call. It wasn't from Denise. It was from Detective Martin Harlan, Ridge County Sheriff's Office. "Mr. Lawson," he said, voice steady but clipped. "We need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in your case, and, well, it concerns your property directly." When I arrived, he didn't waste time. We executed a search warrant at the Silver Trail HOA clubhouse this morning, in cooperation with the DA's office, he said. Found a lot of what we expected: financial files, doctored minutes, zoning drafts. He paused, then tapped the folder on his desk. But we also found a hard drive, encrypted but not very well. It contains internal communications between Ms. Westmore and several parties at Stratus Developments, and those emails refer to a target Phase 2. You know what that is? I nodded slowly. Yeah, that's me. He flipped the folder open. They didn't just plan to take your driveway. They were preparing documentation to reclassify your entire house as an abandoned utility shell. We found staged photographs. Your home, taken from a drone, with comments like, structure deemed unsalvageable, non-occupied. There were blueprints for new homes already drawn up, with parcel numbers. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then, so, this was premeditated. Down to the inch, he confirmed. They even had cost projections for demolition and redevelopment. Harlan leaned back in his chair. We're submitting the case for charges of conspiracy to commit property fraud, forgery, unlawful surveillance, and criminal misrepresentation. Karen Westmore has been arrested and is currently being held without bail. The DA is building a case to include racketeering charges. I walked out of the station in a fog. It wasn't disbelief. I'd seen it coming. It was the weight of being right, finally validated in cold, hard evidence. All those weeks of accusations, trespassing, surveillance, obstruction, and now it was on the record. That afternoon, I stood at the edge of the gulch with a thermos of coffee and watched as a county crew came to dismantle the HOA's illegal gate. They didn't just take it down, they tore it out by the roots. One of the guys gave me a nod as he loaded the twisted frame into the truck bed. It felt ceremonial. I didn't say a word. Later that night, Denise called with an update. The civil suit was greenlit. We were going after full restitution, destruction of property, legal expenses, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Estimated range, low 6 figures, and we hadn't even factored in the federal charges that might follow once the surveillance claims made their way up the ladder. Silver Trail HOA was effectively paralyzed. No leadership, no legal footing. Half the board had resigned, and residents were scrambling to dissolve the organization entirely before they got dragged into a class action mess. And me? I was just getting started. They sentenced her to 12 years. Karen Westmore stood in a beige prison-issued jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front, hair pulled tight like she still thought control was a style choice. The courtroom was full. Reporters, former HOA members, even one of the county commissioners sat in the back row pretending to check his phone while clearly hanging on every word. The judge didn't even raise his voice. He just laid out the charges. Conspiracy to commit property fraud, criminal misrepresentation, unlawful surveillance, tampering with public records, and obstruction of legal process, and dropped the gavel like it was routine. 12 years. No parole for at least 9. Stratus Developments didn't get off easy either. The regional manager who'd overseen the plan was indicted on federal wire fraud and racketeering charges. The firm's state license was suspended, and lawsuits started piling up faster than their PR team could delete old tweets. Turns out I wasn't the only one they'd tried to squeeze. I was just the first one who bit back hard enough. The HOA itself didn't survive. With Karen out of the picture and half the board either resigning or under investigation, Silver Trail Meadows was placed under emergency receivership. The residents voted overwhelmingly to dissolve it entirely. Within 60 days, the HOA ceased to exist. Funny thing is, nobody missed it. Not long after the sentence was handed down, I received a certified letter from the county land office. My parcel, my driveway, and the gulch were all formally declared exempt from any future residential zoning petitions unless initiated by the owner, me. The order included a clause mandating that any annexation attempts without direct notarized consent would be automatically rejected and reported to the district attorney. Permanent immunity signed in ink. I framed it, hung it in my workshop next to the new access keypad. Speaking of which, the new gate went up 2 weeks later. Steel core, reinforced hinges, anti-ram bollards installed just off the shoulder. Not because I needed them anymore, but because I could. I added a little something extra too, just above the lock pad, welded into the crossbeam in neat capital letters. Not HOA land, not for sale. I also added cameras, lots of them. Overlapping angles, cellular backup. One of my old survey buddies helped me run the cable through a low-profile trench so nothing was exposed. If anyone ever tried to tamper with my property again, they'd trip alarms in 3 states before they reached the gate. But the truth was, no one tried. Not after the headlines, not after the trial. Not after Karen's mugshot hit every local feed with a caption like something out of a TV movie. HOA president jailed for land theft scheme. In the months that followed, I found myself busier than I ever expected. Calls started coming in. First one, then 5, then dozens. Landowners, ranchers, retirees, people with 3 acres and a mailbox getting bullied by overreaching HOA boards. They all had the same story: intimidation, false violations, threats, and silence from the authorities. So I did something. I set up a legal assistance fund. Free Ground Foundation, nonprofit, community funded. We don't do politics, just defense. We connect property owners with land use attorneys, surveyors, and media outlets. We teach them how to fight, how to win, and people listen. Because when someone pushes back against fraud with the weight of law and truth, they don't just win a court case, they make it impossible to forget. Now, every time I drive up to my house and see that gate, I don't think about the war I went through. I think about everyone else who won't have to.